And I hope you guys can see my screen, right?
Yes, we can.
Okay, that's good. Okay, so welcome. This is our 34th PC Open discussion. And we'll go through the normals, and then there are some questions that we'll discuss this week. There are quite a good amount of questions which I received either on the question form, Microsoft form, or on YouTube recordings, or via LinkedIn, and some via mails. So I'll just try to consolidate everything here. Okay, so let's go through the normals. Here is where you go for registration every week. If you want to be default attendee, drop your email and name in the chat, and I'll make sure that I'll add you in future meetings. And you don't have to go and register every week then. Okay, so we'll start with questions, and then if time permits, we'll open it for discussion. So the first question that came was from Joe's, and it was on the last week recording where we discussed about the performance factor with the partial loading. And his question is around how the SQL statement will behave if you do a find set false false instead of doing a find set blank, as long as you are not changing the record. Is it different and or faster? So Joe, I'm not sure, but this is something maybe good for everybody who is here. Let's do a quick understanding of record dot find set, and if I'm not wrong, the default values for the parameters inside find set should be false. So those who don't know and have used find set in the past, most of the developer always use without parameters a find set, right? But then there are two optional parameters that you can specify. One for update, that means you'll modify the record. And then the second one is if you are trying to modify the key of that table inside your repeat until. So let's read it through. I think both should be false, but let's read it through. For update, set this parameter to true if you want to modify any record in the set. Otherwise, set the parameter to false. Okay, initiates the lock table method before any records are fetched. If you set this parameter to false, then you can still modify the record in the set, but the updates will not be performed optimally. But the last thing is important, the default values false. And the same statement holds true for the second option, which is update key. So Joe, to answer your question, as in the first part of your question is, did we try using find set false and false? It'll have the same impact. And if there are any contradiction to that statement, I'm open for it. But either I do a find set blank or I do a find set false false. For SQL, that's the same statement because these two parameters by default, if not specified, are false. So I don't think that there will be performance factor if I do a false false. But the second part of the question is super important and interesting, and that we'll go through today, is what about calcy field? And is it better to use load fields with calcy fields as well? Now, the interesting thing about the calcy field is that the calcy field is actually calculated from another table. So, and if you attended Dynamics Con, I guess Stefano, if I'm not misspelling his name, he went through an example scenario of calcy field with the partial load and load fields. And if I remember it correctly, he said that even if you use the load field with a calcy field over there or a flow field over there, it will actually fetch the other table also, which makes sense because for the calculation, the other table also need to be loaded before that calcy field happens. So I cloned that project. So let's open that project again that we used last week. and we'll tweak it in a way so that we can test it. So just a background, if you are not there, in the last week, we created 3 extensions. All 3 extensions had a table extension on item ledger entry with an integer field and a text field. So just this table extension on all these 3 extensions that we created, extension 1, 2, and 3. And then to check the performance, we created this separate extension, which had this code. So let's take a flow field into it. So let's open my Business Central and let's go to item ledger entry and pick a flow field. Okay, so let's use cost amount actual because it has some values. Cost amount actual. So if I do a set load field of cost amount actual, and then I try to do a total value of the same field, let's see how it behaves. I'm pretty sure that it will not load extension tables for the item ledger entry, but let's see how it behaves because the cost amount actual actually gets calculated from value entry, right? It's a calculated field which is coming from the value entries. So let's see how it behaves. And right now I'm not doing a calc field. And then we'll try using the calc field or set autocalc field, whichever, we can use either or. So when I load this extension, that should publish here. Okay, it's here. And before I go to my, this is the page called pages performance testing. So let's do a performance testing. Okay. So when I click on this calculate sum, this function will be called. I'll stop the debugger, but at the same time, I'll open the SQL profiler. Our friend that we saw last week. Let's connect this and we'll do a new trace. So I'm expecting that it'll load some set of field as it did last time and the cost amount actual. But at the same time, okay, and the events are selected. I'm sure that the filters are applied on database name. Yeah. Okay, let's run this. Started. And let's go back here and do a calculate sum. Total value 0 because I didn't do a calc field. And let's do a stop. Okay. And let me go at a point where it calculated 32. So this is my select statement. And these are the fields. Let me open Notepad so all of us can read it. Okay. Okay. So what it did this time, it did entry number, source type, dimension set ID, and then system ID, system created, base Microsoft field. But it didn't even pull the cost amount actual, and that makes sense because it's not a normal field. It's a flow field that gets calculated, right? But we don't see any references of pulling the value entry table. And I guess the reason is because we didn't use the calc field. So let's change that and let's set it here. And let's do a cost amount actual autocalc field so that it's get calculated. You can either do calc field inside repeat until, it's up to you. Okay. So it's here now. Okay. And search for performance testing. Let's put it this way. And then we load our SQL profiler here. And let's start it again. So, okay. Take some time to kind of flush it out, this data, and then reinitialize this. Okay, that started. Let's do a calculate sum. And I guess I set that variable as integer, I guess, which I was returning. My bad. So let's do a decimal here and change this to decimal. Okay. Okay. So let me start it here again. Any thoughts what it will pick up this time? We have seen that it did pick the selective field from item ledger entry last time. But what about value entry in this case? So this is the value. Okay. And let's stop it here. So let's see what happened. Okay. CPO active session. And I don't see a select statement. This, okay, select is null item. Okay, this is the statement. So let's open the notepad again so that we can paste it there and read it in full. So it did set item ledger entry timestamp on item ledger entry. It did a join on the relation between item ledger entry and value entry. But then where is from? This is the one from Kronos item ledger entry. The outer reply. And then did a select top one of cost amount actual from value entry and sum of cost amount actual from value entry from value entry table as cost amount actual. Okay, so in case of when we use a flow field in our calculation, it is still not loading all the fields from the table. So if you see at this point, it did load this is the relation here, item ledger entry, dimension set ID and dimension set ID as system ID, and this is system created. All these are system fields. And then it says is null of cost amount actual, where the value entry and sum of cost amount actual as cost amount actual. So surprisingly, it didn't do a full join on value entry while trying to fetch that value. It just calculated that sum and returned that in that query. And from the item ledger entry table, it did pick the selective fields, which is the timestamp, the primary key, entry number, and then the fields that we have seen in the past, which I don't understand why, but there should be some reason to fetch these. Source type, dimension set ID, and then all the system field. These all are system fields, which is system ID, system created date, and this, which is surprising as I thought it might do a full pull from value entry to calculate that sum, but then it didn't do that. It just pulled that value by calculating the sum of that field and returned it at this point. Any Thoughts, any question? Somebody want to see what happens when instead of set autocalc field, if I do a calc field on that field? Okay, let's quickly see this scenario also, so that we can compare what happens. It'll take some time, so I'll start it here. Okay, I'm waiting for this to load. That's done. Okay. Okay, it did this time, which is surprisingly, yeah, because my calc statement was inside the loop. So for each record, it went there and it calculated that sum. But this time it did it for a specific entry, it seems. And this doesn't seem a full query. Let's put it here. So it did select some of that cost amount actual from Cronus USA value entry and the extension ID. And then based on that sum index field, which we called statitex, I guess, in SQL, it was able to fetch that value where entry number, for each entry number, it went and calculated it. But it didn't, went through that it went through that loop every time, because that calc field was inside that repeat until. Yeah, I guess all that we have learned for all these years after the sum index set autocalc field was introduced, as in it was a little bit buggy initially, but set autocalc field have a better performance than using calc field, because that doesn't repeat every time, and it does that calculation a little bit faster than the calc fields. So I think Joe would have got his answer on that, but Joe's would have got answer on that. But anything else before we move ahead from this point? Okay, if there's nothing, let's move ahead. Okay,
Saurabh,
so
one thing.
yeah.
For instead of writing calc field inside the loop, repeat until, if we use set autocalc field, then it went through. Means, can you show that query again?
Okay, here we are, and it went through here. The SQL statement completely changed, right? Because at this point it did this outer apply to find that sum of cost amount actual. So this part was fetching it from item ledger entry, whatever the values were required, and then to fetch this value, cost amount actual, it did this outer apply to get the cost amount actual from value entries with the sum of cost amount actual.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
It did that relation here, right? That item ledger entry is equals to that entry number over there. Okay. So let's move ahead on that, and we'll see the other questions. The next question that I received this week was, and I started hiding names if they are not sent directly on, on the forum. Okay, I guess David had some comments. I didn't read through them. Do you know about Postman's SQL formatter? Okay, I'll try that, David. On Notepad++ add-in, the trace did start in time. The outer reply hasn't changed since 2013. Load fields doesn't affect calci fields. Okay. Load field don't affect calci fields. Okay. So if I'm understanding it correctly, David, you mean that there is no impact on the calci field statement based on the load statement that we are using.
Correct, and that's the same way it's been since 2013. So that's that changed when they moved to the 64-bit client.
Right.
I mean, mid server. Do try PoorSQL. Yeah, it really will help you make you much better than Notepad.
Yeah. Okay. I'll surely try that. Okay. So the next question that I had, and as I was saying, I started hiding name because somebody felt bad because I took name in the meeting. If it come via email or if it not coming from on a public forum. So this question was based on a video that I did about how you can schedule your reports and code units using job queue. And I guess the person wanted some help because he was trying to set up a job queue on get sales order report, I guess. Object ID 698. And if I understand it correctly, this is coming from the requisition window. So let's go in client and let's see where that actual report is. So what happens if as much as I know requisition worksheet is, let's suppose I have a sales order. So let's create a sales order. So if I create a sales order, let's pick any customer. Okay. And then if I have type item, as far as I remember, it only works for type item because that's what you can raise a requisition for. I put some quantity. And then the requisition worksheet works only on two situations: when you have a spatial order or you have a drop shipment, if I remember it again. But I don't see that field in there. So let's do a quick personalize and let's add a field. And that is using code. Yes. Okay, so let's add it here somewhere. Okay, done that. Of purchasing code like dropship or spatial order. Just for the demo, let's use spatial orders here and then spatial orders in this also. So either in the case of drop shipment or spatial orders, you can go back to requisition worksheet and pull the sales line. And I guess that's where that report is used, which is 698. So let's see that. So if you go to requisition worksheet, and okay, there is already some quantity. So let me delete these lines. Okay. So you can either use drop shipment or the spatial order, and then you can get the sales order of that particular type. So as I've selected the purchaser code as the spatial order, under the spatial order, I'll do a get sales order. And if I'm not wrong, this should be the report that is part of that question. Okay, inspect page and data, and oh, this doesn't show that report number. That's odd. Okay, but yeah, get sales order on the top. So that means this is that report, and the person is trying to schedule this report. That's what that person is trying to do. So let's go back into our VS Code and understand why he cannot schedule this report. So what I'll do is I'll create an object of page requisition worksheet. Okay. And it cannot open this. Okay, let me go to object designer that we have. Okay. Okay. So here is that action get sales order. All right. So what happens in either on drop shipment or get sales order or in the spatial order that this parameter changes, like 0 or 1. So if you notice before running this report, which is this line, it is actually calling a function to set some parameters over there. So if you go here, you will see that where is that get sales order? Copy the function name and then go to definition. So here it is passing the requisition line and the spatial category, spatial order attribute, either it is in spatial order or a drop shipment. And then based on this requisition line, I'm pretty sure somewhere on report, there should be some functions. So let's collapse the request page. So before the report starts, it gets that template and the worksheet name based on the line that is received by calling that function. And then that line is used to get the last line number. And then the same line is used to insert those items into the requisition line. Because you are trying to schedule it from report from the job queue, you are not able to set that parameter, and you're getting this error message because your parameters are empty and you're getting an error somewhere in here. The requisition template dot get of the warehouse template name, because in your case this parameter, this variable is not set, so it's returning you blank in your job queue, and that's why this error message. So while we use job queue, we need to remember that object, we need to understand that object before we start scheduling that. We can't just go ahead and schedule every report in the job queue and expect that it'll do whatever is required, right? So in this particular case, if somebody want to schedule this report, that person need to somehow create a requisition line and then call that function, and that can be achieved by a code unit. So if there are any question, I can show how it can be done or what would be the right way to do this if you have to. Otherwise, I'll leave it to the person who asked that question. He can email me again and I can reply to him. So anyone wanted to go further on this, or should we move ahead? Okay, I take this.
Sorry.
Yeah.
This is Steve. I had one question about job queues. I don't understand why sometimes it's a code unit, sometimes it's a report. Is there a reason why you choose one versus the other? Is the report just allow you to have a report output?
So as in it's just a code processing, right? As in so report can also be processing only where there is not a visual output, but you just want to go through a process, right?
Okay.
In the same way, code units can also achieve the same. And you will see people scheduling reports more because in the on-prem world or in the NAV world, code units were expensive in comparison to reports.
Oh
Right?
my gosh, you're kidding
So
me.
no, reports are super cheap as in comparison.
Wow.
And they both can do the similar thing as in if anybody else have any other opinion, I'll be happy. But I don't think that there is anything specific that you cannot do in a report that you can do via a code unit.
Fascinating.
I would like to add one thing here.
Yeah.
In the report, if you use report in job queue, you have an option to set a request page parameters. That is, you don't have in coordinate.
Yeah, but then there as an word you can have that. Yeah, in the job queue you can again use that code unit with the job queue as the as a source of that code unit, or set that code unit to point to the job queue table and then play with the parameters string, right? You can again play it that way. Yeah, but report gives you that flexibility that you can define your filters on the job queue as Vijay is saying, and then run the same report multiple times, right?
I see. Okay. So
Right.
from the UI perspective, a user could potentially have a few more parameters as a result of a report.
Yeah, so like if you go into job queue and let's try to create a job queue entry on a report, let's try to pick a number. Okay, there should be a statement report somewhere. Anybody remembers the customer statement report number? I'm bad with numbers, but okay, so let's say customer statement report, right? So as Vijay is saying that you can open the request page here, and then let's say on this report you just
Right.
want to use this particular job queue for a specific for only customers who have currency as euro. Okay, so then
Right.
this
Yep.
job queue becomes for euro customers, and then you can
I
have a
see.
separate job queue where you want to have different set of filters for the same report, right?
Okay. And so the report job queue allows you to have these additional parameters as a result of the statement report, but a typical code unit may not have a similar set of parameters.
Will never have a similar, will never have a parameter as in this section is
Oh, never
specifically
have
for
the,
reports.
okay.
Yeah.
Got it. Got it. Okay. I think that's a meaningful distinction. Thank you.
Yeah, because then you can have a similar report running for three different filters that you want to run based on the scenarios that you have.
Right. I
Whereas
think
to
that's valuable. Yeah.
yeah, whereas in case of code unit, you can only do it from using that. Then there is something called as parameter string. So you can pass different
Okay.
kind of parameters and then decrypt that parameter in your code unit to do different tasks. So
Okay.
that's also possible, but then that's a separate code that you'll have to write in your code unit.
Right. Right. And it looks like it might be less user friendly if the user needs to modify parameters.
Right.
Okay. Okay, cool. Thank you. Thank you both.
Okay, thanks. That makes sense. Okay. So then there is one other question about, again, from someone on LinkedIn. So I'm not taking names, but this person wanted to add some custom action on an open custom page, wait card. He added 4 fields into it, and then he want to set those fields from the purchase order rather than inserting manually. Okay. I think you need to have a shared key as in between both the tables, your wait table and your purchase order table in this case. And what would be the right example to show you? As in, let's open system and we'll see that. So like how on a sales order, there should be something that shows you that relation.
Either you can use comments.
Yeah, that's a good one. Let me open that. Yeah, so if you see the comments page, this, as Vijay is saying, you will see that there is a shared relation between these two tables, and that's how this only shows you comments related to that particular order. So based on the document type and the number, you can have multiple comments here, but when you switch to a different order, this page comment page filter will change based on whenever you're trying to open that. So in the similar way, you can achieve this, whatever that weight card thing is, based on having that same relation between your weight table and your main table where you want to relate to it. And once you have that relation, then on insert or at any place, you can decide that anytime the insert happens, you can fetch the main record and fill in these variable PO number and vendor number. As in PO number will come automatically because that will be the part of the primary key. But then vendor number, you can fetch it on the insert statements. Okay, so I'll take a pause at this point because the next one is a big one, and I have got this request multiple times. I might postpone this one for next week. But if there are no questions, then I might get into this. But otherwise, we can kind of take other questions if there are any. Shahid, you have your hand raised. Any questions?
Yes, I have one question actually.
Go ahead.
Can we use formula field in Dynamics?
What kind of formula field?
Like in table extensions, we have 3 columns. Say just have A, B, and C.
Let
And
me
yeah.
Let me create one so that it's not confusing to anybody else. Let's create a table extension. You said, right? Just okay, go ahead.
Yeah. So A, B, and C, these 3 columns, and D columns will sum up these 3 columns, first 3 columns, A, B, and C.
Okay.
And another 3 after D, another 3 columns. Let's say E, F, G.
You're saying, if I'm understanding it correctly, that there is, let's say, a table extension on your customer table. Just to keep it simple, you have 3 fields. Okay.
Right.
Let's say 50505 field 1. Okay. Of type integer, decimal.
Integer.
Decimal. Okay, integer.
Or decimal, no problem.
Okay, no problems. Okay, and you have 3 fields like this, right?
Right. Or you use two fields, no problem.
Okay, I use 2 fields. Here they are. Okay, now.
And third column will sum up these 2.
So why you want to do that on table? You can have that field in the page, right? The way you are expecting it. Or do you want to store that value? That's a different thing then.
In record level, actually, I need to calculation every record value, and I like the actual scenario is that I'm developing a payroll, and there are like salary deductions and salary increments. I mean, there is some deductions and some are additional.
Right.
So I need to find out the net salary at the end of the record statement.
Oh, so if I understand it correctly, you are looking something like how a bank statement is generated, right? Assets of debits, assets of credits, and then a running total.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. And you.
So for that,
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Vijay.
sorry to interrupt, but
No.
for that, I think you can use a simply flow field, because your
Actually,
elements, which you define, like your salary component, basic, or something, either it's earning or deducting. So the elements will be defined in the child table, and the sum flow field you can use in an employee master kind of master table, so that it will give you the net.
actually, if I discuss on your matter, profile actually works on the row level. As you said that I need to prepare the child level table, and I need to sum up the data in the higher table, or you
So
say the master table. So from row level to, I need to calc, but I need this column level.
if I'm understanding it correctly, Shahid, what Vijay is saying is like you have this customer card, right? In the same way, in your payroll solution, whatever you're building, you'll have an employee card, right? And then at the end of the day, you can see that here. But anytime a debit or a credit happens, that actually becomes a ledger to that, right?
Right.
Does that make sense? And if if you just need on a printable copy, and if I'm wrong, Vijay, please correct me. But then you can do it from a report perspective, right? That to this particular employee, I have given 5 salaries, sorry, 5 different salary component, and then 1 deduction, and then again 5 different part of salary, and then 1 deduction. But at the end of the day, his whatever I need to pay him is this, right? And then when you want to print it as a bank statement, you'll still be able to do it on a report. Does that make sense, Sahid? Or
No, that's not my requirement actually, because what I said that is working on row level, because you are making transactions, each row level, and here is summing up based on the row. That is what FOF will do. But my need is different, because I need to do it in each record level. So in record, there are 3 fields. I need to sum up first the 3 fields, and I need to find a result based on these 3 fields, and I need to find out another 3 or 2 fields, another sum up, and I need to find this first sum up to the second sum up. There is again the net. The first one minus the second sum up. I need to find out the net one. So it's working on the record level. Same record, not
okay,
in the multiple record.
in that case, you should create those fields as actual fields, okay? And then set those field on the insert or modifier of that table based on whatever your formula is. You know what I'm trying to say?
Repeat, please.
So if I have this field 1 and field 2, and then you have a field sum, right?
Right.
So these values can only, field 1 and field 2 can only be updated in these 3 situations: when the record is inserted, when the record is modified, right?
Right.
So in these 2 triggers, you can have your formula, whatever it is, that when I'm trying to insert a record, make sure that my sum total is a sum of these 2. If the value is modified, recalculate the sum total based on the field 1 and field 2.
Right.
You can't do a field 1 plus field 2 on a table. And that doesn't make any sense, because this cannot update automatically. That's the first part, right? Because change on this field will never reflect this field.
Okay.
You'll have to do it from code.
Okay.
Because, right? So these are the 2 instances where you need to update your record anytime an insert or a modify happens, whatever the value of field 1 and field 2 or whatever your formula is, you can write that formula in these two triggers so that that get executed in these two situations.
And you are suggesting to do it in form level, right? Page level.
No, I'm saying in the table level. This
Okay.
is a field on the table, right? So
Right.
there are only two ways to change or add the value in these two fields. Either doing an on insert or doing an
Right.
on modify,
Right.
right?
Right.
So in those two situations, you can call your formula whatever that is for to calculate the sum total, so that that gets updated whenever these two operation happens on a record in your table.
Yeah, then yes, yeah, you're right. That's the only solution we have. But my question is that is because SQL Server does these things. I mean, we can use the formula inside the record level. What I want actually, but is there any way to use the formula in column level?
I don't think so. As in the page level, yes, not in the form level.
Okay. Actually,
Because it doesn't
so
make, if
yeah.
you think logically, it doesn't make any sense, because how this will be impacted when this value is changed, until unless it's a flow field or it's it's a field which is a normal field. So you will have to handle that situation via code.
Yeah, actually, I did it I will share my concept. Actually, I use the event handler for these two columns. So, but as I have multiple columns, it's forced to use the event handler for 3 or 4 columns, and that's why actually I'm trying to use some formula if there are.
You can't. That's for sure. You can't have a formula on a field which is a formula on the same record in the same table, because there's no way that field can get updated when the other fields are being changed, right?
Okay. So okay, I got it.
Okay. Anyone else have any? Otherwise, we can just briefly talk about it before we move forward. Okay. So this is the question I guess I have received on emails, I've received on LinkedIn chats, on Twitter, everywhere. And how do we import an Excel file in Business Central? And those who are coming from NAV background, that's one of the most common requirement in the NAV world, to have an Excel file imported into a staging table, and then based on the way you want to handle it from the staging table, then you can write your code the way you want it. So I guess there are very little changes that happened on that situation, on that code segment that was available in NAV, but those are not bigger changes. So what I've already done is I've created this so-called staging table, uh, considering the scenario that the requirement is to import either a customer or a vendor, and that will be decided by a field type in your Excel file, and then you'll import that file. It'll come into the staging table, and then from here, based on this type field, you can have your different set of code written that it gets into customer or it gets into vendor. And then normally in these type of table, we in NAV Word, we'll add a field kind of status, where it is it a new record, and when we try to process it, does the processing actually happen, or was there an error message, and what was the error message, kind of thing. And then we'll have a page which will be used on the client environment to see that info before they start processing it. So there was and there is a table which was available in NAV and now in BC, which is Excel buffer. And that table used to help us to import an Excel file into a staging table. I don't know how, but in NAV Word, there was a way to schedule it, to place it on a specific folder on the server, and you can read that file every time there is a new file, and then maybe move that file to process folder, and then wait for the other file, which is something maybe I'll have to think about, because that's the only possibility using SharePoint Online, where you can place that file and then store the base URL somewhere and then read that file. But in this particular scenario, let's try to understand what changed in that Excel buffer because of being on Business Central, and how we write that similar kind of code. So this is a new code unit to kind of import to staging, where you want user to pick a file, read that file, and then import it. So let's create the basic triggers, which is okay. On run. And in this, what we want to do, let's just quickly list those steps. Read the Excel file, means have a user select a file and then read it. Then get the kind of the last row and the number of columns in it. So you can do a select last row and column, and this is always I have done in NAV Word. And then import that file, import to staging. So these will be kind of my three functions to process. So let's start writing that. The first one is read that Excel file, and that's where you ask user to kind of read a file and select a file, and then based on that file selection, we'll move ahead. So the only way that we can ask user for a file is now using streams. There's no other way. So we'll use our upload into streams. That requires a dialog title, from which folder, which is blank because there are no folders. From filters, we can choose a filter that we want, and then what will be the file where it will come, and then where will be the in stream where the data will be stored, and this will return a boolean. Okay, so let's create some variables so that we can use them in the scenario. So let's create a variable, let's say, or what is that first one called? It's dialog title. Select dialog, label, and we can simply say this as import Excel file. In the this is the string that I've used all the time, so I'll copy this somewhere on from my notepad. This is kind of a filter to filter out your Excel file, and you can see it in any standard base object that you will use ever. So now we have the select dialog. Okay, and then the next parameter is from folder, which remains empty. The next one needs a from filter, which we have created our Excel filter token. And then we need a from file and from stream. Those are the two things that we need. So let's create those. Server file name, type text, and then the last one is my stream. So I'll create in a stream, and we'll call it as Excel in a stream, or in a stream. Okay. So let's pick these values here, and if this does not return true, then you can put an error message if you want, but this will kind of select that file that you need. Now, once you have that file that you need, you can do your checks that do you find the file or not and all. So and then a Excel file can have different tabs. As we all know, you can have 5 tabs into Excel. So you need to select your sheets. So there used to be a function which is no longer available or marked for on-prem only. So that's where I guess people are getting confused. But if you find your file, then you need to have your file name received. If it is not blank, then let's pick the file name from our favorite file management. The file management should have something to get file name. This will return the file name that we have for the file that we are using. Because I don't need it forward though, it hardly matters. I just need this name. And then I need to get the sheets from it. So for that, I'll have to create this Excel buffer variable. So I'll create it here. Set it to temporary. Now this temporary Excel buffer used to have a function to select sheet name. Now this select sheet name is actually used on-prem. It's not allowed for SaaS, but if you wait while you're typing those names, there is a select sheet name from stream now. So you can actually read the sheet names, and if there are multiple sheets in your Excel, it'll pop up as sheet selection dialog for you. So now a replacement of your select sheet name is your select sheet stream, and then you can pass your Excel in a stream that you have fetched into this import stream into this variable or into this function. So this will return you the sheet name, and if there are multiple sheets over there, it'll pop up a sheet selection dialog for us. So let's create a sheet name of type text. Now this sheet name will then can be used to open that particular sheet. But as we are running out of time, I'll just call this function and we'll see how that sheet selection works. So I will do this and I'll add an action into this page. Actions. Import Excel. What happened? Okay, what it is not finding. Closing bracket is required. I'm bad with this, so let me, no, that's what it is. Actions, and then inside that action, oh no, that's what it is. Actions inside the layout. What I'm missing here. What is the problem at this point? Closing bracket expected, and here the closing bracket expected. There is a closing bracket. Okay. Oh, area. Add. Okay. So this is an application area all, and tooltip as import, caption as Excel import, and an object as my code unit import to staging. Okay, I don't need all this. Let's quickly run this through and then we'll call it for a day. Okay. So our page was customer vendor staging. So let me find that. Okay. So once you are on this page and you try to click on that action, it'll ask you to select that file based on our dialog, and then it can give you those options that you have. So if I select a sheet, let's say where there are multiple columns, and maybe I'll have to create one. I don't have a sheet where there are multiple columns. So right now there is only one sheet. So if I use this right now, it will automatically pick the default sheet. So if there are 4 sheets into this and you select this file, the pop-up will come to select the sheet from which you want to read. So once you select this sheet, and then we'll come next week into the same code, if time permits, we'll move ahead from here and we will call all these functions. So the first one that we did, read sheet, is to select the file from the user and then see if there are multiple sheets, and then fill in the sheet name based on user selection. And then we'll use the file name and the sheet name to open that file and loop through the records to kind of populate that data into that staging table. So, and then there is a good concept that I want to talk about next week about the try function, which is kind of related to this. So we'll see that next week. Sorry for running late today. It's, I guess, 3 minutes overdue. But then we'll see you next week. Any questions? I'm happy to wait here if there are any.
I have one question.
Yeah. Yes, I.
Actually, it's a request to you as you what you are doing, showing to us the file import, and if possible, next week I like to, I mean, rescheduling the same thing. Like you are importing one Excel file. I did for a test file, but what I want now that I like to repeat it for each day.
Automatically?
Right. So
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That yeah, once we go through this, I'll see this, because I haven't had a request, but I'll see how you can actually read a file from your SharePoint, because on-prem, yeah, even on-prem, you can't read the file from a local directory, right? So you'll have to see how you can read a file that is stored on your online storage.
Okay. Because I'm using on-prem. So is there any way, I mean, from my client directory, it will be helpful.
On-prem, and I haven't tried on-prem, but on-prem you might be able to read your local directories. I don't know is it possible or not, but let me think about it. On-prem, is it possible or not? But for SaaS, you know, I always say this on our internal meetings also, that your solution should be SaaS compatible so that it works on-prem and SaaS as much as possible. You can do that, right?
Yeah, that's I understand. But sometimes, for customer perspective, we need to compromise some things.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, anything else? Anybody?
Thank you, Sora.
Yeah, thanks, man. Thank you all.
Thanks,
So
Sora.
I guess, yeah, next week we know what we are going to discuss. So feel free if you want to join. If you want to skip that doesn't sound interesting, that's okay.
Thank you, Sora.
Kiran,
Okay.
thank you.
Thanks, Saurabh. Thank
Thanks,
you.
man. Thanks.